But if you don't know who you are and what you want, what your values are, you're not going to be able to establish boundaries. So we want to be able to establish boundaries in a way that is reflective of who we really are as human beings, but also what it is that we want to move towards. Because it's not like who we are in a static sense. Okay, I'm this person, I've crystallized myself, this is who I am. But it's also what am I moving towards? What it is that I want? What is it that I want? What it is it that I don't want? What do I want to set as my standard? Who do I want around me? What kind of information am I willing to accept? The only way you're going to know these things is if you have a goal as far as the type of character, the type of person that you want to become, and the type of life that you want to create, not just externally, but also internally. So let's talk about boundary setting and how that actually functions in reality. So, first of all, I'm the first to point out that it is in general very hard to do that with your family, especially if you're close with your family, if you live with your family, if you talk to your family on a regular basis or on a you know on a semi-regular basis, it's going to be a little bit harder, and especially depending on the dynamic of your family. So the best you can do, and I'm going to speak on this in general terms, and then as far as the specificity, you can ask questions and we can go into a little bit more detail there. But in general terms, the way you want to establish your boundaries is to be direct and to be respectful, because people in general, if you look at why a lot of people are in prison, most people are in prison is because they feel like they've their respect the respect that they're looking for from other people has effectively been violated, and that leads them to a state of either anger or despondency, and they typically do something out of that state of mind. So we want to be very careful with understanding how people in general, ourselves included, even though we might be less sensitive or more sensitive, we do have a need for respect, a need to respect others, of course, because we want to be able to have that sense of, honor and veneration. Say, for example, of maybe a holy person or even your elder, your whoever, and and vice versa, which is that I'm assuming if you're an adult, you appreciate when other people, either on the street or in the store, or people younger than you, they act respectfully towards you, because it's a sign that there's a mutual sense of acknowledgement, understanding, and cooperation, right? With that showing of respect. So that's the attitude that you want to take. You want to take the attitude of, if you want to cooperate with this person, you want to set the boundary in a way that allows them to see that you still want to maintain the relationship, right? This is the very key point. When you're setting boundaries with people that you want to be around, that you want to maintain a relationship with, you're setting that boundary in a way that lets them know, and you're being direct, that I don't want to be involved. I'll give you a great example, personal example, which is some time ago, I decided that I didn't want to go to any bars, any clubs. I didn't want to be in any places at night where people were either getting drunk or getting inebriated in some way, changing their state. I just kind of started to feel uncomfortable around that. So this is the thing, is that you also have to pay attention to your internal state, which is that how am I feeling as a result of being in this environment? How am I feeling as a result of being around this person? How am I thinking about things as a result of being around this person or being around this environment? Because if you notice that things are moving away from the character that you want to build or the virtues that you're aspiring towards, then it's a positive sign that perhaps it's a boundary that you should set. So you don't do it, right? You don't want to drink alcohol. You don't want to, smoke marijuana. You don't want to do different things like this. And so you have to not only set that for yourself, but you might be around people who engage in that behavior. So the best thing that you can do is realize, number one, if you don't take care of yourself, nobody's going to do it, right? Nobody is going to care. No human being cares for you as much as you can care for yourself. And when we talk about care, we mean protecting your temple, right? This is your temple, right? This is the first temple that you've been given, your body. This is not like some meat sack. This is not some useless thing that we just carry around. This is your temple. You have to treat it with respect, right? And then your temple is, you have your mind, right? And your mind is really what attunes to things, and what can create insights, what can create a sense of knowing where to go, orientation. So these things have to be oriented together. So the way you need to do that is by making sure that you're doing things and you're going through like a routine or a ritual that feeds, right? That feeds the your spirit, right? Your body, your spirit, your mind, all of these things, so that they can be aligned and you can be the best version of you that you can possibly be, that's unique to you. So in order for you to do that, if you were communicating with other people, of course, you want to tell them, listen, and this is what I said in this particular case. Got a call, and it was really hard because my friend was had his very close friend, his birthday party, who he hadn't seen in a long time. I hadn't seen him in like 15 years or something like that. He wasn't really like, my friend. I wouldn't call him my friend, but it's, somebody that I would go out with. And he invited me to this party, and I said, I just I can't be around that environment. And then this is another thing, is that you don't have to rationalize and justify everything. It's not really necessary. If a person cares about you and loves you and wants the best for you, they're gonna understand. Now you might need to explain a little bit so they're not in the dark and they don't feel like you're shunning them, or you're purposely withholding information because you don't want to be around them. So you just have to make sure that if you want to be around somebody, but you just don't want to do certain things or be around certain environments, then you have to make that known. So I said, listen, we can go out to dinner. I said, we can do something else. We can go for a walk. We can have lunch, but I'm not going to be in this environment where other people are going to be drinking, potentially doing drugs. I just can't do that. Right. I can't put myself in that position. It doesn't mean that, like, I want to, like, I love you, you're my friend, I want to, I want us to of course maintain this relationship. So it has nothing to do with that. Don't think that the reason I'm saying what I'm saying is because I'm just subtly trying to end our relationship. That's not what I'm doing. So you want to put aside any misconceptions that the other person might have, anything, any presumptions that you think that they might be thinking based off of what you're saying. So you're kind of trying to be sensitive to the other person's experience, and you're saying, this is what I want, right? Or not, this is what I want, but that's what you're communicating, is that this is who I am. This is what my standard is. Again, not saying those words because you don't want to put yourself in a superior position. This is the very key thing. You don't want to make the other person feel small or feel like they're a bad person, because that is going to damage the relationship. And especially if you want to keep it, you don't necessarily, not necessarily, but you don't want to do that, right? Now, if you don't want the relationship, then you're going to have a difficult conversation, and you're going to have to say, listen, based off of how things are going, um, and the trajectories that our lives are taking, I feel like we're moving into different paths, and these are the things that I want to do. Like, maybe, and if you want to keep the person in your life, you could say that, I would love to do these things with you. I'd love for you to go here with me, or go to church with me, or we can go out and go for a hike or something, or go out and whatever you guys want to do that's healthy, and or go to each other's houses and just kind of like hang out, have a conversation for like a couple of hours, and maybe that's it. Or do an activity, right? Go out and do some kind of activity or something, mini golf or whatever, right? I don't know, whatever you want to do, but you really have to make it known that this is what your boundary is. And if you don't want the person in your life, then you have to have a conversation. You could say, listen, this doesn't have to have anything to do with you. It has to do with how I am, uh what kind of trajectory that I'm taking, or like how I'm changing. I feel like, there are certain things that I want to accomplish in life, internally, externally, and I don't have time for certain things anymore, and to do the old stuff that I used to do. And I feel like this is a decision that's very hard for me, but I need to make it. And you can have this discussion any way you want, but what you're trying to do here is, you're not criticizing the other person. You're not telling them that it's because of you in this way, and it's because of you in this way, and it's because of you in this other way. You're not trying to say that. Like, you might have to give some kind of a reason if they are, say, for example, not supporting you in some critical way, that maybe perhaps you need support and you put it out there before, and they're still not supporting you. You could say, that. I mean, ex with my ex, I've told this story before, but I set boundaries where I've said, listen, if we're not able to communicate openly and have these long conversations to resolve problems, then this relationship is not going to work. And I said that multiple times. And then it got to the point where it was the last straw. And then I ended the relationship and it was kind of like surprising. And the reason sometimes people get surprised is because they don't think that you're serious until you set the boundary. And the thing is that if you backstep off of the boundary once you set it, then there's no limit to how many backsteps that you can take, because you've already violated yourself in a way by not setting the boundary. Because if you set the boundary and then you remove it, you haven't set it. You haven't done anything to actually put it forth and make sure that it's a solid boundary. It's a line there, not in the sand, but you've carved it into the ground. So it's not something that could just be washed away by water. So there's different ways to set boundaries with people that you want to stay in relationships with people that you don't want to stay in relationships with. But at the end of the day, remember that the reason you're setting the boundary is because you are not separate from the things that you do and from your environment. Remember that you are not separate from the things that you do and from your environment. So, which means that if you continue to do the same things that you've always done, as they say, you're going to continue to get the same things that you've always gotten, and that's not surprising. Same with reading. Right? What do they say? You're the sum of the five people, the five books, the five people that you hang around most with, and the five books that you've read, something to that effect. The point that's being made with that expression is that you are not separate from your environment, from the things that you do, from the places that you're in, from what you see, from what you hear, from what you consume. You cannot pretend like you're this some kind of a higher being that's completely divorced from reality. You're not. So once you understand that, then it's really important to make that decision. And the reason most people don't make that decision is because of pain, because you've created and we create attachments to people, to things. And I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine. We create attachments to people and to things to the degree where we've now identified with how they are or how they should be, which means any change, if they're perturbed in any way, we feel like our own identity is threatened because we've attached that to things of this world. Right? We instead of focusing on the things that are everlasting, we focus on the things that are lasting, that they change, they die, they're of this world. They don't stay the same. So what do you think is going to happen? You're changing, right? You're a human being, right? You have a mind. We're operating in time. Now, is there a part of us that is unchanging? I believe there is. Can we truly understand that or really live from that place? I don't know. Maybe we can in moments. But at the end of the day, remember that if we're living in the world, we're not monks. We're not living on the mountains, right? We're not spending our entire lives praying, right? And working in that way that these people work, right? Which means that we're living in societies where there are sidewalks and streets and cars and jobs and lights and cameras and all this stuff, right? Phones. This is where we how we live. And so knowing that it's extremely important to not become, because the thing is that once you're able to establish a proper relationship with things and have a proper relationship with God, then you know what the hierarchy is, right? You know what the most important thing is. And everything else is just below that. Because when we're talking about your ascetical practices, the things that you do every single day, right? If you're a religious person, right? Perhaps you're praying, perhaps you're reading scripture, perhaps you're going to church, perhaps you're um, taking all the principles that you're learning and applying them. Perhaps you're fasting. Perhaps you're doing good works in the context of that setting. And then after that, it's like you're and way at the bottom of the list, it's my phone, right? Do I need the latest phone or not? But that's such a trivial thing. So if we start attaching ourselves to things, to items, to even people, how they are, then we're always going to be disappointed, right? That's why with my relationships, I treasure them so much because I understand that they're a privilege, they're a gift to me. I didn't do anything to earn them or to deserve them, right? I was just kind of given them, right? Okay, fine. Maybe I could say that all of these things that I've been doing have led to the solidification of certain relationships that are good, but I can't take the credit. That's God's credit. I give God the credit because it's by God's grace that I'm here where I am, that I woke up for another day, that I have breath in my lungs, that my heart is beating. It's only by God's grace that I'm here. And all of the other things, this is the dichotomy. This is the paradox that we have to embrace. The things that don't go the way you want them to go, right? The mistakes and the fact that we fall into bad relationships or financial ruin or lost career or whatever the case is. Anything that happens, we have to be able to take responsibility. Why? Because in order for us to actually make a change, we can't point the finger, because if it's another person's fault, if it's God's fault, if it's this person's fault, if it's this organization's fault, if it's society's fault, then we've basically given the person the power to change the situation, which won't happen. And so we're just going to be stuck in this kind of loop of resentment and anger and despair, and we're just going to keep spiraling. So when things don't go your way, what you have to do is you have to understand what you did incorrectly, and you have to make the necessary corrections, reflect, right? Contemplate and think about it again from a detached perspective. So you're not attaching, because you're not your mistakes, right? And as we say, you're not your sin, right? Whether you're angry or prideful or greedy or lustful or in despair or whatever the case is, that isn't you. That's just like something that's possessing you, that's influencing you, that's deceiving you to act in a certain way, to speak in a certain way, to think in a certain way. That's not who you really are. So we have to understand is that when we're doing things that are expanding and transformative and creative and things are going well, that's God's role, right? That is how God created the universe, which means, what are we doing here? What are we doing here is we're giving God the credit when everything is going right. We're giving ourselves the credit when everything is going wrong, so we can make the errors, because at the end of the day, remember that nobody's going to make the correction but us. And that's a fundamental stance of gratitude. And we're making sure that when we understand that principle, setting the boundary becomes a lot easier, because we know that, listen, I know by not setting this boundary with this person, with this thing, with myself, things can go sideways. And because I didn't set the boundary, because I didn't set my standards, because I didn't decide, I didn't specify what kind of person that I want to become, what kind of virtues that I want to create, because I didn't do that and properly delineate that, I shouldn't be surprised at all the negative consequences. Because, like I said, we're not separate from the environment that we're in. We're not separate from other people and the books and the media that we consume, right? It influences us, it conditions us. So we have to be able to set that boundary. If we don't do that, we're not going to be able to live the life that God intended us to live, because everybody has a unique purpose. You have a unique purpose. You were given unique individual gifts and talents that only you can give to the world. Nobody else can give those. And if you die, they die with you. I've said that before. So remember that setting boundaries is not some trivial thing that you do when you're just reactive to somebody. Like, oh, I set the boundary. That's not what it is about. You're not emotionally reactive. That's not setting boundaries by being emotionally reactive. You're saying, this is what I'm willing to accept. This is what I'm not willing to accept. That is what a boundary is. And it has to be, you have to be clear about that. And you have to be ready for certain things to die, certain parts of you to die, certain relationships to die. Because if you're not ready for that, then you're not going to set the boundary. Then you're going to take a back step. Then you're going to draw it, and then you're going to wipe it away. Or you're going to, pretend like you drew it, but it's not really there. And so you're going to wonder why you're falling into this cycle, because you're basically betraying yourself, or you're being influenced rather to betray yourself. Talk about that in a future video. So I hope this was helpful at a very high level, the importance of setting boundaries and how that actually influences your life, the way you think, the way you act, what kind of person you are, how other people see you, and whether they gravitate to you or not, and what kind of people you pull towards you as well. Because you also have to think, well, there's a certain reason why certain people, they seem to all kind of gravitate together, and they all seem to be kind of alike in a certain way. So you have to ask yourself, the types of people that I want to be alike, it's not so much the people, but it's the characteristics of God. So when I pray, I ask for God's wisdom, I ask for God's love, I ask for God's compassion, I ask for me to be able to love like God loves, be wise, be compassionate, be generous, be unselfish, be gracious, be forgiving like God is. So I ask for God's qualities. That's what I ask for. Because remember that when we see people who are extremely virtuous, when you're meeting these people who seem to be like holy people or whatever the case is, that's because they're manifesting internally what's not of this world, what's not of this material world. And so it's no wonder why we're drawn to that, right? So if you want to be a light, you want to be a beacon to other people, remember that you have to be able to set that boundary. Right? There are a lot of monks who go in the mountains and they become hermits, right? Which means they don't associate with other monks. Like other monks may ask to visit them because they're such holy people, and they're like, I don't want to be disturbed from my prayer. Even in their own communities, right? There are different kind of positions, if you will, different things that they do. Some are priests, some are monks, some are hermits, some are hesychasts, which is like people who've taken like a vow of silence, or who try to be as silent as possible and not speak. And so this is this very hard stuff. This is not, and what we do is we take their lessons and we kind of implement them, because we also want to be able to learn from people who are, let's say, closer to that. Because can we truly ever understand God? You know, very unlikely. Are we going to be able to experience God's energies? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But that means we have to prepare ourselves. We have to prepare this vessel to be able to receive that energy. And if we don't prepare it, we shouldn't expect to receive it. So remember, set the boundaries, because they're super important. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, make sure you like it, subscribe to the channel, and expect a lot more of this coming up.